Hi everyone. The lesson is Objective-C, Instance versus Class Methods, Part 2, Instance Methods. So we'll be using these tools and references. It's important to finish this prerequisite before you do this lesson, which is Instance versus Class Methods, Part 1, Class Methods. Now this is Part 2, so make sure you do Part 1 before this. You can find the link in the description. In this session, you will learn once again instance versus class methods and why you need instance methods and a practical on instance methods. As usual, it's going to be practical demonstrations. So let's go and create the project now. So create a new project and make sure it's macOS command line tool selected. Click next. Let's say example 1 and give a location to save the project as well. Okay, so now in the previous lesson, we declared class methods and we saw advantage of class methods. Have a look at the previous lesson to find it out, to learn about it. So because of that, let's try to create another example with a class method. But this time, let's say I want to create an employee class. So let's say new file, class, let's say example 1, no, sorry, employee class. Okay, let's create. Now in the employee class, let's say I want to keep some data. So let's say, so for that I have, as best practice, we use properties, right? So we'll go to the interface of the employee class and we'll declare properties, right? Let's say int emp number, and let's declare employee name, that salary properties. Okay, so I declared 4 properties: employee number, name, hours worked, and hourly rate. And I'm going to get the data from these from the outside classes. So because of that, I made them properties. But once I get the hours worked and hourly rate, I'm going to calculate the salary inside the class, and I don't want to expose the salary to the outside classes. So because of that, salary I have made it as an instance variable. Instance variables, right? So okay, so I got 4 properties and 1 instance variable. Now let's declare methods. Let's say I want to declare method, let's say instance method, class method, void, let's call it as calculate salary. So I want to calculate the salary, and also let's have another class method to display the data. Let's call it as display data. So I have 2 class methods for this task. Now let's go and implement these class methods. So okay, let's copy the 2. Let's go to the implementation and let's put the body for both the methods. That means I'm declaring the implementing the body. Okay, now in the calculate salary, what I want to do is I want to take the hours worked and hourly rate and multiply and put it to the salary. Salary is an instance variable. So because of that, I'm going to say underscore salary. I'm giving you example, right? Underscore salary. Let's copy and paste so that you know I'm not doing any mistake. So underscore salary equals to, then as if you look at our previous lesson on properties, then you will we discuss when we are referring to hours worked and hourly rate properties. We discussed in a previous lesson that every property has a auto synthesize instance variable. So when I'm accessing the property from inside the class, I will use that auto synthesize instance variable. In other words, it's underscore hours worked. So look at our lesson on properties. So you will see what did we discuss about that. So it's underscore property and underscore hours worked and underscore hourly rate. We have discussed that in detail in that property lesson. So now if I do this calculation, right, I'm getting error immediately. It says instance variable hourly rate accessed in class method. So this says you can't, so the error is telling that I can't use our instance variable hourly rate inside the class method. Okay, what does that mean? Now calculate salary I have declared as a class method. Now as you know, in order to call the class methods, you don't need an object. You can just call them through the class. For example, if in my main method, if I import the employee.h, I can call the two methods without an instance because they are class methods. So I can say employee, then the method calculate salary. That is because it's a class method. Then I can say employee display data because they both are plus. Plus means class methods. And now, so now the thing is this. When you are calling these methods, let's say display data and calculate salary, you don't have object, right? Because as you know, you can't call them through a object, because if you try to call them through object, you are getting error. We saw it in the previous lesson. For example, if I say employee, right, E1, right, if I try to create an instance, right, then if I say employee alloc and let's say initialize, right, and then if I try to call these methods through the instance, I will be getting an error, right? Say calculate, I'm not in fact getting it even. I'm not getting to the list. Why? Because calculate salary is a class method. So on an instance E1, I can't call it, so it's not even coming to the list. Calculate salary is not even coming to the list. So if I even copy and put it, still it will give me an error telling I can't call this method because it's not a instance method. So if I compile this, see it says no visible interface. So why? Because these two methods are class methods, so I can't call them on instances. So I will have to comment this line. I can't do it, right? Awesome. That means when you call these two methods, right, there is no instance, right? There's no instance. If there is no instance, then there will be no instance variables created as well. That is the theory. So if you are not creating instances such as E1, and when you run the program, because there are no instances, there will be no instance variables created. So this instance variable salary is not available for the class method because there is no instance created. As you see, you can't call a method on the instance because they are class methods. So because there are no instances, whenever you call class methods, the instance variables are not ready. In other words, instance variables are not available, because for the instance variables to be available, there should be an instance. But once again, I'm reminding you now, when you call class methods, there is no instance. Instance means object. There is no object. Instance means object. So there's no object. So there's no instance. That is why from class methods, because there's no instance, it doesn't allow you to use instance variables. I hope it's clear to you now, right? So that means from inside a class method, I can't use instance variables. Now, on the other hand, I want the outside programs to assign data. I want the outside programs to assign data into the objects. So usually when you have these properties, you want data to come from outside classes. So I will show you one of our previous examples which we have done, right? So that you will remember this. So in one of our previous lessons, that is under properties, if you remember, we did this example. So we had this employee, this is in the previous lesson, this is not the current one. We had the employee class, we had these properties. And then from the main method, you remember, we create employee instances And then for each instance, we were able to uh, assign data using the setters, right? Set employee number one. So because when you got properties, there will be synthesized setters and getters created automatically. So you don't have to declare the setters and getters unless you want to customize like this. They will be auto generated for the properties. That's what we discussed and in this lesson, properties. So we are able to call methods like set employee number one, etc. Right? So let's take two of these. Let's copy from this and bring it to the current project, right? So in the current project, I have a similar situation. I got these properties, which means I'm expecting the data to come from outside. Now let's say if you are not creating instances, right? If you're not creating instances, let's say you can't call it like this because there's no instance. But I got EMP number one. So there is a setter for the property called set EMP number. So this one, set EMP number. So because there's no instance, I will try to call this using a class like this. So on the class, I'm trying to call the setter. Once again, it will not allow, right? So it says there's no class method for set employee number, which means now once again, so for the properties, the auto-generated getters and setters, you are unable to call them using a class. You can call them only using a instance, right? So that means I will have to create an instance if I want to give the data like this, right? But still, let's comment and keep these two lines because you are unable to call the class methods. Now, at least if I create an instance over here, right? So if I create an instance, now I got an instance called E1. So at least on E1, I can call the setters. I can say set EMP number at least. And then I got a EMP name. So then I can call a setter call, right? I can call E1 because I got a EMP number property. I can say set. See, now they are coming because on instance these methods the setters will appear. Set EMP name. Let's say John. Awesome. So now I got a instance E1, and to the instance E1 I assign data to the properties through the setters. Right. Awesome. Now I have assigned the data. So let's also now assign the hours worked and hourly rate as well. So set hourly hours worked. Let's say it's 10 hours, just for example. Then let's set E1 set hourly rate. Let's say $50 for example. So I now set the data to the properties. Salary I'm going to calculate using calculate salary. So that's what I'm trying now. After setting the data, to calculate the salary, in the calculate salary method, I'm trying to calculate the salary by multiplying, but it doesn't allow me because calculate salary is currently a class method. A class method cannot use instance variables because when a class method is executed, there is no instance, there is only a class. So that if there is no instance, there will be no instance variables created. That is why a class method cannot use instance variables. So this example shows you clearly in a situation like this, you can't use class methods. So in a situation like this, you will have to make them instance methods because these methods have to access instance variables. So the moment you make them an instance method, this error will not come. This error will go away. Can you see? The error went away. So in a situation like this, you need instance methods. So now this shows that you can't use class methods always. Of course, in the previous lesson, you saw that class methods are having some advantage. That is, it saves memory. But now you saw when you have properties and stuff like this, and when you want to accept data from outside and do things like this, you can't use class methods. So in a situation like this, now you realize you have to use instance methods, right? Okay, so let's say employee number equal to, right? So now I need to display the employee number. So emp number. So I can use the synthesized auto synthesized instance variable, right? Same way, let's display the other data values as well. Okay, so I'm just displaying the employee number, name, and the salary, and I'm printing this instance variables. Awesome. So then let's go to the main method, and now you understand you can't call them as class methods because they are not class methods. Now they are minus mean instance methods. So let's put a comment and say instance methods. These are instance methods. So now if you can't call them as class methods, you should get error. If you compile this, you will get error. See, you can't. So I will have to comment them, right? Let's comment the two, and let's put a comment explaining that you can't call them. So I put a comment and said you can't call them using following syntax as they are not class methods, so you can't. So you'll have to call them using instance. So calculate salary and display. Awesome. So let's compile this. Now this should compile, build success, right? And let's run this. This should run and give you the desired output. So with this exercise, you realized that you can't use class methods always. So in this example, we had to use instance methods. Awesome, right? So now the same way, if I create my second object, let's say employee 2, and let's say e2 dot set e2, and let's say this is employee number 2, let's say this is Anne, right? Let's put the other values. So I put Anne, hours work 30, hourly rate 100, and I am running the methods. As you can see, John and Anne, and the calculations are also correct. So this was a very good example for you to understand that in a situation like this, you need instance methods, not class methods. And it's obvious. Why? Because you got to keep, let's say, you got to keep data of John and Anne. Let's say you want to keep both of them at the same time in the memory. Let's say for a processing or some reporting. In that case, when you have E1, you have to assign data for E1 separately. So that means there should be a separate instance, that is E1. Then for Anne's data, there should be a separate instance, that is E2. So whenever there are instances, then when you call calculate salary on E1, it has to operate on instance variables of E1. When you call calculate salary on E2, it has to operate on instance variables of E2. Which means calculate salary and calculate salary should be a instance method. That's why we had to make it an instance method. So this lesson clearly showed you the difference between class methods and instance methods. Awesome. So we did a practical lesson and we did a practical demonstration for you to understand the difference. Now you know very clearly when to use class methods and when to use instance methods. Now, whenever possible, try to use class methods because that saves memory, because you don't have to create instances, you don't have to create objects. But if you can't, then you have to go for instance methods. Awesome, right? So you can find the link to download the source code for this practical in the description section. We didn't use Apple Developer Docs API that we'll be using for future lessons. So look at our next lessons in order to complete this Objective-C part. So have a look at our other videos, so practicals on Objective-C, and we are very excited to see you in our next video. See you in our next video.